Anthony Richardson's career best day carried the Colts to victory on Sunday. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And you guys can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit fanduel.com to get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Zach Hicks, your favorite film nerd over at horseshoehuddle.com. And of course, I'm joined as always by Ben Boris at Colts Film Room on Twitter. And we are over the moon being able to talk about Anthony Richardson again on this weekly early week episode that we do every single week for you guys. We've been having to talk about other players, about Joe Flacco in recent weeks, Shane Steichen's, downfalls, I guess, this season in recent weeks. And it was funny, the last time Ben and I talked face to face was right after last week's episode, and we were both kind of like, yeah, this feels very disciplinary for Anthony Richardson, and I don't know if we see him again the rest of the season. Flash forward to 24 hours later, Richardson is back as the team starter. He rolls into this New York Jets game this past weekend and puts together his career best day. I mean, he was fantastic as a passer. I mean, that's not even me just over exaggerating. Like, he was pretty fantastic as a passer in this one. Again, 20 of 30 for 66.7% completion percentage, 272 yards passing, which was 9.1 yards per attempt, and 1 touchdown through the air. Added 10 carries for 32 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. I mean, this was everything you were looking for from Anthony Richardson. So on today's episode, we're just talking all Anthony Richardson. We're going to go through all of it, what we like from his film, what he can build on going forward, and kind of what the expectation is the rest of the year. But Ben, real quick, just to kick off this episode, what were your early thoughts on how Anthony Richardson looked in this past game?
I mean, if you're a Colts fan, this is everything you want. Like this, he gave you everything that you were potentially looking for. It was almost really impressive because, we obviously had the handshake bet going in, and I was from the initial rip, I was like, yeah. From the initial rip, like I was like, oh no, like he'll be back in a couple of weeks. You didn't feel that way,
no,
and then as the weeks continued to go on, it made it harder and harder to believe that because obviously, and that's a whole nother discussion for a whole nother time, is what the Colts said publicly, but it made you harder to believe that. When it did happen, I'm thinking to myself, well, this is great for us who started this segment with the whole point of talking about Anthony Richardson every week, going through this roller coaster. And this feels like the peak right now. It's almost impressive how he it feels like he reinvented himself as a passer in 14 days when I thought that was impossible. Now, this is one performance in one situation, so I can't say that he's reinvented himself necessarily as a passer, but there's a lot of differences from maybe what you saw early in 2024 when things felt like a train track that was going off the rails, and now it feels like he's right back on it again.
Yeah.
So that's all you can really hope for. There was a lot of numerous impressive throws that we'll talk about in this segment, I'm sure, but just overall, I don't know how you're not super excited as a Colts fan.
Yeah, one thing I said right before he got benched, and I can't remember if I said it to you, if I said it to Jake, or whoever I said it to, because, I was being pretty critical of Anthony Richardson. You had to be critical of Anthony Richardson early this season.
There's an element of like being a believer, but also calling it what it is, and
right,
not exaggerating what you're seeing.
Right. We never advocated for him to get benched on this show. You, me, Jake, whoever has been on this show, nobody has ever advocated for him to get benched. But we did say, hey, look, if this is how he's going to look by the end of this season, things might need to change because that's just how the NFL is. You can't have a whole season of just not improving. And what I said right before that, though, was just give me one game. Give me one game that I can hang my hat on and say, this is what I believe that he could look like. This is what he has the ability to be in the NFL, and this is his potential. Give me one thing I can just say, like, he played a good football game from start to finish. I'm not saying this was a perfect game from start to finish. Like, there were some issues.
We'll acknowledge that, I'm sure, at some point.
Yeah, there were some issues in quarters 2 through 3. I don't think it was necessarily him as a passer, but just more so some of the structural stuff of the offense, like dropping snaps, the fumble, obviously. But I think when you look at the totality of this past game from start to finish, this was a really strong game from Anthony Richardson. This was the best game of his entire career. I mean, from the fourth quarter comeback to how he looked even in the first quarter, delivering some passes. The Colts took a little bit off of his plate with some of what they were asking him to do, but it's not like they made this like a very, very simplified offense. Like they were still asking him to manipulate defenders with his eyes, to read safeties back and rip deep passes. Like they weren't asking him just to throw screens the entire game. They just gave him a couple this time compared to what it was early in the season where every single play felt like a downfield throw. So they kind of simplified a little bit, but he was still playing some really good QB football out there.
And the best thing that I think you can say, and I understand that Anthony Richardson in the public eye is very polarizing, from analysts to fans to whatever. The best thing that I could always say as two believers of Anthony Richardson on this show, when the chips are on the table, this is when he plays at his best. You can say that even in some of his, worst games per se. When you talk about the week 1 Houston game, the 2023 Rams game, you could even talk about the Jaguars game in his first career start when it felt like he was the only person on that field carrying his team. And that's what he's done since he stepped into the NFL. When the chips, now, can you talk about a second quarter throw or a third quarter mistake that got him to a point that he didn't need to be? Absolutely. But when the chips are on the table, Anthony Richardson seems to be playing at his absolute best. And you saw that on that last drive. And I think that was the epitome of it, where the Colts were continuing to shoot themselves in the foot. But when it really mattered, Anthony Richardson played just as well as any quarterback in the league could have in that situation. And you've seen a lot of this in the way that the offense has changed as well.
Yeah, and one thing we really have to mention too is, and this isn't just like tear down everybody else to make Anthony Richardson better, because Josh Downs had a fantastic day. Alec Pierce had a fantastic day. A.D. Mitchell and his couple snaps, maybe we'll have time to yell about that on here, Ben, but A.D. Mitchell and his couple snaps did some good things. And Michael Pittman Jr., it was an up and down day for him, but he had a couple nice catches as well. But this was a day where the run game was putrid. One of those high floor raising things that Anthony Richardson brings to the table that we were saying, hey, at the end of the day, the Colts be able to run the ball with Richardson. The Jets sold out to stop the run, and they obliterated the Colts interior offensive line with 2 rookies starting on there. I mean, they were just killing Dalton Tucker and Tanner Bortolini in this one, and the Colts couldn't run the ball. So they took away that floor raising thing. Speaking about the offensive line, when it came to pass protection, the interior of the offensive line was corroding the entire game with Bortolini and Tucker. And again, there were some structural things that were not perfect around him, but Richardson still found a way. I mean, even before those final 2 drives, I was still looking at this game being like, this is his best day as a passer. Like, just in terms of mechanics, in terms of not sailing passes, in terms of how calm he looked as a passer back there. I know he had a quote after the game where he said this was the most relaxed I've ever felt on the football field. And 100%, like if you're watching this on film, he looked very relaxed back there. There were a couple plays. I mean, every quarterback has a couple plays a game where you panic a little bit, but we were saying in the early games this season where he panics when he has these open receivers and he sails passes. In this one, it was see open receiver, set my back foot, and I'm going to rip it 1,000 miles per hour. And the ball was getting there, and he was throwing some really, really good passes in this one. So even before those final 2 drives where he really put a really nice cap on the day and capped off with a victory at the end, it was still his best day as a passer in the NFL before those final 2 drives that really put it over.
I don't think it's particularly close. Like the Rams game was the one game I think in 2023 you could hang your hat on and be like, this guy can be there were some special plays in that game. Now they didn't win, but there were some special plays. This one felt like there were some special plays. And then there was a little bit of the simple stuff too that he executed, and looks like he had control of the offense finally. And those are buzzwords, right? Like everyone's like, oh, control of the offense, look calm back there. But like what I really mean to say that is that, the Colts talked all about is like learning to prepare the right way. A lot of that stuff as a quarterback happens when you've done enough. It becomes way more natural on the football field, and you don't need to think as hard. It starts to come to you naturally. And I think that that's kind of what we were seeing. Now, I think it's never going to look like that every time. I think that's really important for Colts fans to acknowledge, and we'll talk about that. But like when it is looking like this, there's no reason that Anthony Richardson can't reach the ceiling that we all know he can get to.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is part of the roller coaster, this type of game, and this is a really high point. And don't get me wrong, I still think there will be some lower aspects going forward, but just give me the high points like this, and I can get excited. I can hang my hat on that. The Colts can hang their hat on that, and they can give you a whole nother season starting if you're giving games like this. So this is a great foundational game for Anthony Richardson, for Shane Steichen, and for this Colts fan base to get excited again. Like I said on Sunday, the most excited I've been watching a Colts game, especially in that fourth quarter, obviously, but most excited I've been watching a Colts game in years. And I feel like I'm not just speaking for myself. I feel like I'm speaking for a lot of Colts fans.
I think this is the most excited that I've been in a long, long time to watch Colts football. Like it's not, it says that it's probably, you could even make the argument that's been like that since Anthony Richards or Andrew Luck was at quarterback. Like it's really felt like there's legitimate future and something to be excited about. And all it took was 4 quarters to really show you that.
Right, exactly. That just shows how desperate we were to be excited about this Richardson project. Yeah. And just giving us one game like this is enough to get us all back on board and all excited again. So coming up, guys, we're going to continue talking about this throws and a couple moments that really stood out to us in particular. And again, keep building on these really positive moments from the Colts' young quarterback. But first, pre-alcohol probiotic drink by Zbiotics is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted to a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break down this byproduct. And just remember to make Zbiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Look, guys, I'm not 21 years old anymore. I'm not just first picking up a drink for the first time. And the day after can be pretty rough for me. I mean, just in terms of like, no matter what I drink. And so something like pre-alcohol probiotic drink by Zbiotics just makes my next day more productive and more just better in general. So here's how it works. Step 1, drink pre-alcohol. For best results, make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Step 2, drink responsibly, pace yourself, hydrate, and get a good night's sleep. And step 3, enjoy tomorrow. Wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day. So go to zbiotics.com/lockedonnfl to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Locked On NFL at checkout. Zbiotics is backed with 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/lockedonnfl and use the code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout for 15% off. And Locked On Colts fans, get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 back in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. FanDuel had the Jets as 4.5-point favorites in this past one, and the Colts blew that one out of the water with the 1-point victory. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Locked On Colts Everydayers, we are back with Ben Boris at Colts Film Room. We're discussing Anthony Richardson's career best day, and we kind of talked about our overall thoughts in the first segment here, but let's go a little bit more specific and talk like the film nerd stuff. And I think the thing that really stood out to me, Ben, aside from the highlight plays, which we could really talk about, we'll talk about like obviously the whole shot to Alec Pierce, the get off me throw to Josh Downs on 3rd down, which was big and basically stole 3 points for the Colts, and so many other really big throws that he made. I think it was just his efficiency on the middle of the field in the intermediate game. I think I saw a stat in this one that he was 9 of 11 throwing on passes between 10 and 30 yards down the field. So again, the Jets, a very similar defensive system to the Colts, where they were, they run a lot of cover 3, but also some 2-high stuff. And they were forcing Richardson to take things over the middle and take things in the intermediate game and take away those deep balls. And Richardson made them pay. A lot of really good intermediate throws to Alec Pierce, a lot of middle of the field throws to Michael Pittman Jr., some good ones to Josh Downs in there. And on a lot of these throws, he's using his shoulders, he's using his eyes, he's using his footwork to manipulate linebackers and manipulate safeties to get them out of the way so he can rip the pass over the middle of the field. That's what you want to see from a quarterback. I know some people will be like, oh, this is first read throwing and blah, blah, blah. And oh, he's just throwing to his first read. Well, he's getting his eyes on his first read.
And who doesn't want to throw to their first read?
Right. But he's using his shoulders and again, his eyes, where he's moving the linebackers and then getting to that first read. So maybe his eyes are on Michael Pittman Jr. the entire time, but he's using his shoulders to move the linebacker out of the window and rip it behind him. That's not bad quarterback play. That's the first. I mean, you're opening up your first read. That's everything a quarterback wants to do. Those were the plays that really stood out to me, because you can't just be a home run or die offense, but you can be a home run and intermediate passing offense and survive. I mean, no one says you have to be perfect on, like, you have to have like 10 screens a game. You can survive just ripping it off on the middle all the time and going 9 of 11, throwing over. That's nearly half of his completions in this game were between 10 and 30 yards down the field. He was really feasting on this Jets defense in the intermediate area of the field, and it led to great results for this Colts offense.
Yeah, I think one of the things that the way the offense changed, the Jets, obviously similar system to Gus Bradley. They played a lot of one spy, so cover one spy. So you basically have man free, and then you have that extra player, which is the adjuster in cover one, and that guy's just going to spy Anthony Richardson, playing a lot of that. And I thought there were times where the offense didn't look so successful, mainly the strip sack, where when the chips are on the table, and this is something that the Colts receivers have inevitably struggled with, in my opinion, is when it's man coverage and you have runaway opportunities, and it's not some sort of rub, it's not some sort of pick play or whatever, some designed man beater. They've struggled to get open in certain capacities. They have.
Well, there's one player who could get open, but he wasn't on the field.
Yeah, he wasn't, and he did it when he was on the field. The other player being Josh Downs. And I think what stood out to me is how dynamic they are in the red zone. They have so many options available because they found a way. Like, I'm not a fan of putting Anthony Richardson under center because you lose technically the +1 because he's not a real threat of the runner. Well, the Colts pulled out some Army, Navy, Air Force Academy offense rollout, something or other that they've saw, because they basically faked a jet motion and then booted him out on a QB keeper and got that +1 back. So I swear it's definitely, I know that there was an article that Albert Breer put out that they watched a lot of Air Force. I went back and watched some Air Force just to see where I could see some of the inspiration for some of those plays. Didn't see that one. I loved it though. But they can really just be dynamic in that area. And that's what wins games. You can't settle for 3 in the NFL and expect to win games. And if you can punch it in for 7, that's what you want. Now, the other thing I do want to point out, we saw a lot of quarterback run. Everyone's like, oh, Anthony Richardson or Shane Steichen finally calling some quarterback run. I am probably of the belief that you need to do it, obviously. I don't think it's always as sustainable as everyone makes it out to call it as much as he called it. And I don't think that's the end goal. As Anthony Richardson starts to develop as a passer and as an athlete and learns what plays he can make and what plays he can't make, you never want to see, like, the truck stick was awesome. Definitely don't want to see that with your throwing shoulder. Just something that when the injuries have piled up, Anthony Richardson still needs to be on the field. So I think a lot of this was game plan. You saw a lot of quarterback pin and pull, which was really just to get these DBs to tackle, and they showed they couldn't do it at all. But I don't necessarily think we're going to see that every single time because it's just not sustainable as the weeks go on in a football season.
Yeah, but I do think it's important during this season for him in terms of you got to run him a little bit. Like, he needs to be. It's such a big part of why you drafted him so high was his ability as a runner. So, maybe not 10 times a game. I still think that's a little bit on the high end, but between 4 to 6 to 4 to 7 times a game, get him running a little bit. Obviously, you want him to protect himself a little bit on them, but when it comes to the red zone, those got to have it moments. Sure, don't truck him with your right shoulder, but get in the end zone.
I'm totally there. I'm more saying that, I think one of the plays that we love, because it's a great just designed run, but running bash GT, which is basically back away from the two guards and it's quarterback power, and you get him in those runs where he's basically running up the A and B gaps, I don't think that's necessarily ideal long term.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be, but I also don't think that you can not run him at all. I think there's a momentum. I think momentum is real. I know there's a debate on whether that's real. I think it's real, and I think it does get him in some sort of a confidence thing that, like, hey, I can gain yards and we're moving the ball, and now I can get into a rhythm per se. I think that's also really important. I just don't necessarily think that running him to the extent and putting him in those positions consistently is going to be sustainable. And I think they're having those conversations as well. Like, I don't think that this is something they've shied away from. Obviously, Anthony Richardson, the biggest thing that's hurt him a lot of the time is he hasn't been able to see the football field, injured in multiple games this year. So I definitely think that that's something that I'm a little bit wary of, though you need to do it. So it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah. And I will say, keep the QB sweep run that they have. That run is money. The one that they scored the game-winning touchdown on. I love that design so much. Keep that forever.
Look, that's a Lamar run. They ran that. Lamar runs that a good bit. They had a pass on the one that was it the one there? Yeah, there was one where Anthony Richardson like got out of this weird sack and then threw it away or whatever. They had some cool passes off that too. So that's something that I think they saw from Todd Monken's offense. I'm almost positive they're not the only person to ever run that play, but I think what it does is no DB is if there's a guy Anthony Richardson, unless it's extremely unlucky, is not getting injured by a DB. Like, they just cannot tackle him. They don't want, the Jets didn't want to tackle him, out there. And that's his strength. So I think that from just an identity standpoint, you can really see how the quarterback run will always be there. And then also, if he can figure out some of these passes around it, we can start to see an arc of being next level dynamic where you don't have to rely so heavy on the quarterback run. The box will be a little bit open. Maybe you'll get people to give JT a little bit more opportunities to run the ball, and you get true dynamic. Because right now they found a way to shut down JT. There's a lot of when things were dead, it was a lot of quarterback design runs that they were doing a nice job, to their credit. And then also just some self-inflicted wounds. So I think we're on the path to seeing the dynamic offense that we all thought was possible.
Yeah. So that actually kind of leads to this perfect finale of this episode here, is talking about where do we go from here? Where do we go with our expectations and our hopes for Anthony Richardson? And where do we go with our expectations for this Colts offense going forward? But first, listen up, renters. Do you ever feel like you're stuck in the loop of rent payments, just watching your money vanish into thin air? It's time to turn that rent game around and start earning some serious rewards. That's where Bilt Rewards comes in. Bilt is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent every month. Pay your rent and watch the Bilt points roll in. Use points to jet off a dream vacation. Put your points toward a flight or a hotel stay with 500 plus airlines and 700,000 plus hotels and properties. You can also use your points to book fitness studio classes, redeem them toward you can even redeem them toward a future rent payment. They're designed to meet your lifestyle and whatever works for you. So pay rent hassle-free through the Bilt Rewards app. Your rent game just got a major upgrade. Bilt points have been consistently ranked the highest value point currency by the Points Guy and Bankrate. So earn points by paying rent right now when you go to join Bilt.com/LockedOnNFL. That's JOINBILT.com/LockedOnNFL. Make sure to use your URL so they know we sent you. Join Bilt.com/LockedOnNFL to start earning points today with your rent payments. All right, Locked On Colts everydayers, we are back talking Anthony Richardson and all about kind of where do we go from here. I mean, it's been a crazy roller coaster ride, and not in the roller coaster ride that we expected coming into the season.
Which makes it a true roller coaster.
Yeah, this is a fun and chaotic and roller coaster where it looks like the tracks are ending at some points and you might go flying off the ride a little bit.
Maintenance halfway through,
yeah, maintenance while you're halfway through a loop, basically hanging upside down. That's the maintenance. But this is where we are right now. We're in the high point of this roller coaster, and we're feeling good, feeling excited. They have the Detroit Lions coming into town. Good defense, fantastic offense, one of the best teams in football, probably the best team in football. So that is the next opponent, but not just looking at the next opponent, just looking at what we're thinking of this team going forward. I mean, first we can start with the offense, Ben, where, the Colts came out in this past game with a lot of 12 personnel. We're going to have a lot of tight ends on. We're going to run the ball. We're going to stick to the run on the early downs. Even if it's not working, we're going to get ourselves into 3rd and 7 if we have to. And that's more convertible than a 3rd and 12. So 3rd and 7 works for us. We'll even run it on 3rd and 9 sometimes. We'll be a little bit more conservative with our game plan. Do we think that kind of sticks going forward with the Colts? Or do you think maybe Shane Steichen sees something in this final stretch that Anthony Richardson just had and said, hey, maybe we can go back to throwing the ball a little bit more? Do you think they kind of stick with, because they were showing some 12 personnel with Joe Flacco too. They were really starting to move to 12 personnel with Flacco. Do you think they kind of start leaning into the 12 personnel a little bit going forward?
Well, they do it a lot versus blitz heavy teams. Like it was a big thing with the Vikings. Sometimes with the Jets, they were as multiple as ever last week than maybe they have, when you look back at some of the earlier games. It's a really good question. I think the first thing that you have to acknowledge is with this offense is that, again, I think an awesome game-winning drive that cannot be understated. And basically Anthony Richardson put the backpack on in this game where there are still a lot of things to clean up. Do not get it twisted. Like this Colts offense and defense made a lot of critical errors that shot themselves in the foot when this game should have never really been this close, or really should have never been down in the game. I think that's really going to be a premium, is limiting a lot of those self-inflicted wounds. Like football's football. Like you're going to throw a pick sometimes. Someone is going to get a penalty in some capacity. That's just how football works. Like you have those. Can you limit them? I felt like the Jets were able to creep back in that game for some really bad self-inflicted penalties. And they also got a little bit lucky towards the end of that stretch that the Jets used that last timeout. And EJ Speed has the delay of game penalty. Had they had a timeout, they maybe are kicking a field goal there. So again, awesome. Don't want to ever take away from Anthony Richardson's performance or this Colts, the resilient win when the plays mattered the most. But I think from an offensive perspective, it's got to find a way to get JT involved. It's got to find a way to build off of this from Anthony Richardson. So that's something that you have to either trust Shane Steichen to be able to do, or you just don't trust him to do it. And I do. So I think that we'll see. We're going to see some quarterback run. We're going to see some things to help out some of this offensive line that inevitably struggled in this game. And hopefully get some RPOs back, which we really didn't see a lot of this year.
Yeah, we did see a little bit in this past game, which I was the RPR to Granson that Richardson threw over his head. I was like, ooh, okay, we're getting some RPR stuff going again. That's nice. Maybe to his throwing side might help a little bit, but then again, defenses are looking for that. So I get it. But yeah, I think it was a good game plan overall. Obviously, the execution was poor at times. Like you said, self-inflicted wounds have been an ongoing trend with this team, not just Anthony Richardson, but from drops to procedural issues to holdings to fumbled snaps. Like it just can't happen, for an NFL team. And you can survive against the Jets that way. I don't think you can survive against the Lions doing that.
And that's what I'm saying, where everyone's loving this up, and they should. And I'm not trying to be like rain on anyone's parade, but I'm saying that like in the NFL, you're never as good or as bad as you think you are. Now, I hope they go out and build on this, and that would be awesome. But it's really starting from ground zero, because you can't not acknowledge a lot of the mistakes that could have costed them the game.
Yeah. And one more thing I want to end this show on, and I think it's a really big thing too, is I'm not going to ask for Anthony Richardson to repeat this performance next week, because this is a really strong performance. And asking a 22-year-old quarterback, asking any quarterback to repeat a 3-touchdown day where, coming back from 8 points down in the fourth quarter, having nearly 10 yards per attempt, which is basically an MVP caliber type of yards per attempt, asking them to do that every single week is too high of a standard. But I do want to see him stack some good games. One good game is awesome. Like a game like this is awesome. And it's enough for me personally to hang my hat on and be excited with him, but keep stacking them. I'm not saying next week needs to be this, but if next week can be, another 200-yard passing day where the completion percentage is like high 50s, low 60s, and you're somewhat competitive with the Detroit Lions in this, that's a big win. Just stack the positive days, go from here and keep building upon what he built up in this game, because early in the season, it was stacking negative games and stacking down games. Let's start stacking some positive ones to end this season. I'm not asking for all these final 6 games to be positive and strong games. I'm a realist. I know how the NFL works. It's not going to be like that, especially with some tough defenses coming up. But if you can finish this season with 4 of the 6 games being good, strong, positive games that you can really lean on and look at the film after the season and say, hey, let's get back to doing what we were doing in those final, 5-6 games, I can take that and run with that. So just stack the good days. Make sure, I think Richardson said everything perfectly after the game too. He said that, he said after the game, hey, this is just one game. Good win, guys. You guys did your job. I did my job. Let's get to the next one and let's keep stacking this. And that's the perfect mindset for this. Keep stacking those good days. As much as it's important to avoid stacking bad days, it's more important to keep stacking the good days. So let's stack this performance with other good performances and be really optimistic heading into the offseason, or heck, if they really stack the good games heading into the playoffs. But let's finish this season strong and keep stacking these good days for Anthony Richardson.
And I think that goes for Anthony Richardson. But the one thing I want to add is, you would love to take, and good quarterbacks do this. Great quarterbacks do this. I mean, look at Joe Burrow all year, but you would love to have a scenario where Anthony Richardson gets some help from the talented unit that was built around him. And when we looked at the beginning of the year, and this is a good offense around him with Pittman, who was coming off a good year, Pierce, who's shown up in critical situations, Josh Downs, who's great. But, again, I'd love to see the offensive line take a step forward despite how banged up they are. I'd love to get this run game going, and it happens sometimes. But you would love to have a performance where Anthony Richardson doesn't have to cover up some of the self-inflicted wounds on all, from a collective unit. So totally agree. They made all the plays when it mattered. This Colts team definitely does fight for all 4 quarters. You can say that about them. But, yeah, I think that's where I'm looking forward. If you're asking Anthony Richardson, this is the new standard, calmer heads will prevail here. He's going to probably have a stinker before the season ends. And that's just how life is. And with any quarterback, really. I mean, look at Lamar this past week. You can't expect these MVP level performances week to week.
Yeah. But great performance. Great performance.
Fantastic. And
fantastic.
There's no reason. And I feel like we're raining on people's parade. So I don't want to do that. I just want to be calm heads, because you're going to get disappointed at some point if someone doesn't say this to you. So, yeah.
But again, something to hang your hat on still. Something we will take that at this point. So be excited, Colts fans. And like I kind of said in the post-game show yesterday, let's use this week to celebrate rather than have the impending doom of the Detroit Lions coming to town this next Sunday. Let's avoid thinking about the Detroit Lions. Let's just be excited about what Richardson did this past week and talk about that. But a lot of season left to play, 6 games left. The Colts are technically not out of the playoff hunt. They have to win 4 to 5 of these next 6 games, which is very doable if they get quarterback play like they did on Sunday. So great game from Anthony Richardson, good game from Shane Steichen, Josh Downs, Alec Pierce, A.D. Mitchell and his 2 snaps out there, whatever it was. Good job from all those players out there, and hopefully they can build on this going forward. But really, really promising game from this Colts team. And again, hopefully they can exchange some punches here with the Detroit Lions. We do want to thank you guys, though, for making Locked On Colts your first listen today. Now for your second listen, go find the new Locked On NFL with 2 shows every day. First, the Madman Tyler Rowland kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso, and then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And if you guys want to become a Locked On Colts insider and chat with us directly and get the insider scoop, follow the link in our show notes. And if you don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, at Zach Hicks 2, and at Colts Film Room all on Twitter. We're also on TikTok, we're on Instagram, and even recently we have Locked On Colts on Blue Sky. So if that's your thing, we're over on Blue Sky as well. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube or listen to your podcast. We love you guys' ratings, reviews, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow afternoon.